Sorry, say again. Okay, I guess I kicked off the recording a little bit earlier. Well, we have something like 30 seconds to 9:05, but let's just get started. Continue the conversation that we left off a few minutes ago. So 118 release, as myself, Paul, and Eric were discussing earlier, the branch cut should be done today. We are a little bit behind schedule because this is the first time for a lot of folks as RMs, and also KubeCon. IstioCon was in the middle, and we were delayed because of that. So branch cut was the .0 release should be today, and I propose that we push out everything else by 3 weeks accordingly. So a code freeze will push out to 24th, and the final release will push out to the 30th. Since this is the first release for ambient, we don't want to compress the schedule. In fact, we want to give folks more time to go test. So John's question wasn't branch cut weeks ago.
The branch cut was, and then we had a gap in the middle where some of the steps weren't finished because I didn't get around to them because of a few live things and KubeCon in the way. So I'd need to go back and look at the things, but it was things like the Prow setup that didn't happen until about a week ago.
Okay. Are there any objections to the update to the schedule?
So I think what you're saying is tentatively, unless we need more, we could get by, just looking at a calendar here, we could get by with a beta 1 week from today, potentially a beta 2 2 weeks from today, and then we could do a release candidate 0 with the code freeze on the 24th, and then release on the 31st. If that makes sense.
I'm sorry, is that a question or is it a solicitation for feedback?
Well, that I guess it could be either. I mean, that's just that, looking at the calendar, that seems to be something that we could probably go with, if that would make sense, and then feedback on that.
I think that's reasonable. John, anyone?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Fine.
I take silence as that this is fine. All right. Well, with that, I will update the release wiki, and let's move on to topic number 2. Jackie.
Hey, Francis, would you mind actually sharing the doc?
Yep.
I'm in a hotel because my apartment flooded, so it's not the best internet. I know. But yeah, this is the first time I've written these 2 proposals, and the first time I've talked about them. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. But yeah, obviously open to any feedback on how they're written or structured or how I present them. But yeah, just mostly a call for reviews. I've gotten a few reviews on each of them, but I just would love some more feedback. So this first one is discussing the new Kubernetes cluster trust bundle resource that was announced, and it's just beginning to be supported, alpha support for the resource. So this is just proposing how we could potentially, or how Istio could potentially integrate with this new cluster trust bundle resource. So the resource, just a brief overview, is a new mechanism of distributing trust anchors cluster-wide. So it's a cluster-scoped resource. It's kind of a natural replacement for using config maps to distribute these trust anchors. So rather than having to create a config map in each namespace, you can just create a single cluster trust bundle resource that can be using an additional, I think it's called a PEM trust anchor kubelet volume mount. You can use that to mount this cluster cluster trust bundle, so you can access the trust anchor in the file system. So kind of a natural place for Istio to begin adding support is with the replacing the Istio CA root cert config map that's used to distribute the trust anchor for establishing trust between the like control plane and workloads. So instead of creating an Istio CA root cert config map, you could reference or inject or add to the pod spec. You could add the PEM trust anchor referencing the cluster trust bundle. This is something that needs to be, or the cluster trust bundle support for or use for it needs to be explicitly enabled in the Kubernetes environment. So this is something that we could detect, and then also users could optionally specify it with a like an environment variable on install. So I discuss, if you scroll down, so I kind of go over the background of why using config maps isn't the best approach. It just requires broader permissions to create and manage these config maps. And then there's also a bunch in every namespace, not necessarily namespaces that we need them to be and that we want them to be. So using a cluster trust bundle would eliminate that extra overhead work. I referenced all the different resources related to this cluster trust bundle. And then if you scroll down more into the next section, I just go over the goals. I'm just focusing on the scenario where the like trust anchor is read using from the config map, from the mounted config map by the like the Envoy proxy. So that's just the scenarios that I describe. There's a lot more. There's a lot more possible integrations, but those aren't discussed in this doc, especially with like referencing it in like a destination rule, a gateway, mesh config, proxy config. Those are all reasonable extensions where you could reference this cluster trust bundle. And then I just go over the different requirements and the risks of using this cluster trust bundle. I won't go over those, but they're mentioned in the KEP. If you keep going down, I go over the different use cases. So when you're using an external CA or external signer, when Istio D is the CA and you're using a plug insert, or when you're using an Istio D generated self-signed root certificate, and how distributing trust looks in both of those scenarios. And you can keep going down. And then I just briefly go over the initial design idea, which is just using the environment variable and referencing that or specifying that or setting it on install. And then also what it looks like when we would inject pods with these PEM trust anchor volume mount. And then I just talk about the alternative approaches a little bit down. Mostly the alternative approaches are just not starting with the config map and replacing the config map, and instead starting with referencing it in a different resource, referencing the cluster trust bundle in a different resource. And then in the appendix, I also touch on the trust manager, which is an additional project that's also come up with a custom resource definition. I think it's owned by Cert Manager or worked on by them, which is they created a CRD to distribute trust similar to the cluster trust bundle, but the cluster trust bundle is a Kubernetes resource or core API resource rather than a CRD. So I'd love any more feedback on this kind of initial integration, but I think it would offer a great alternative to using a config map to distribute trust for workload to control plane verification. Yeah, hi, Iris.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for the proposal. So one thing in my head is how will this influence, for example, if there are multiple Istio D control plane in a single cluster, will this work well in this scenario? Because currently we support this scenario.
Yeah, I think it would. I think you would just on like a single, when you specify the control plane, you just specify or reference the trust anchor that you want to be used by that control plane, and you want to be injected by resources or namespaces monitored by that control plane. So I think it could work. I didn't go into that in this proposal. I kept it relatively scoped to just the single control plane scenario. But I think it should be definitely possible, and I think easier to do. I think John added a comment in the doc, kind of discussing that. Yes, I don't know, John, if you want to talk more about that.
No, I think you mostly covered it. Like you said, I think it's actually easier. I mean, we could do it the same in today, but it's easier to just have like 5 cluster trust bundles, and then you just say which one you want to use for each control plane, and then you're good to go. Whereas with the current method, we always use a fixed name, so you can't actually really do that today. So I think it's allowed, and it actually is probably better.
Oh, okay, that is great. So if we can, for example, if we do the code change, we can add some integration testing to cover this part. That will be great. So one other part is for how about for example, for different workload, can they use different cluster trust bundle? I remember we support this scenario as well.
Yes, I think
that work.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wondering, will this scenario work as well?
I think that would be a natural extension, but I think my initial proposal does not cover that, but I think that would be a natural extension, is to additionally support that. But given this is like I'm not sure exactly what's allowed, but given I thought that this was an experimental support, I wasn't sure if we could therefore not support all scenarios that we already support. But so that just might be my misunderstanding of how that works for an experimental feature. So yeah, if anyone knows more about that, they could talk more to that. But I didn't include that in my proposal, but that would be, because I don't think you would specify that in the operator or on install. I think you'd have to specify it with an additional resource, like a proxy config or something.
Yeah. So maybe add some, clear clarification about what scenario that this proposal will cover, and which part is out of scope. Because we want to make sure all the current scenario can work well using this new mechanism.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
I was going to say the opposite. Sorry, it is. It's basically, I was thinking this is perfect for the safe Istio, and it doesn't have to cover all the scenarios, because we have 25 different scenarios that nobody really can list. So in future, that should be the way to specify the trust bundles, and all the other ones will die away or remain supported as they are. I don't know, but I'm worried about adding more ways to do things. But this seems to be the canonical way as soon as it moves out of experimental and it's available actually in Kubernetes, because that's really the problem today.
Yeah, I would say as soon as it moves out of experimental, it's worth enumerating all of those different scenarios and supporting them all.
No, the opposite.
Oh, the opposite. Even it is not moving. Okay.
Yeah, this is the way. I mean, in future, cluster trust bundle is how Kubernetes defines trust bundles. End of story. We shouldn't have additional ways that Istio only supports them, or weird ways, or whatever. But again, we need to wait until it's available in Kubernetes. And also the setup experience, we have CRD watcher, so we know that cluster trust bundle is available. If it's available, we can kind of look for it and use it.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Any more comments? Please add them to the doc. But thank you. If there's no other comments on it, I can move on to the other proposal. It's slightly more brief. So this work was proposed by another Istio community member. So I just wrote up the proposal for it. But the idea is that currently when Istio D is functioning as the certificate authority, there are kind of two secrets. They're both used for different purposes, but they both store the, and in different scenarios, but they're both used to store the root certificate and additional information. And these are the Istio CA secret and the CA cert. The CA certs is used when when the user is plugging in their own root certificate, and the Istio CA secret is used and created by Istio D when it creates a self-signed root certificate, and then it populates the Istio CA secret with that self-signed certificate. So this proposal discusses combining those secrets in order to simplify the process and just centralize kind of and combine the very similar purposed secrets into one. The major difference between the two, well, aside from that the user creates the CA cert versus Istio D, is that with the CA cert, Istio supports like watching that secret or watching the file system, and then updates and reissues certificates based on that CA cert being updated. And that is not the case for the Istio CA secret. So I would, so this doc mostly just proposes either combining those into a new secret, so creating an entirely new secret, or just combining both of them into the CA cert secret and preserving the functionality of being able to watch the file system or watch the secret and update or reissue certificates based on any updates without having to restart the control plane. So basically just transitioning both into the CA certs and then watching, just maintaining that watch. So it would expand the functionality. So even if the user does allow the it does allow Istio D to create that self-signed cert, they could then go and update that secret potentially. So it just expands the functionality of the Istio CA secret. The main thing to consider here is just backwards compatibility. So we want to make sure that before any users that are already have Istio CA secret or CA certs defined, when they upgrade, you want those you want Istio D to still be able to interpret either of those, and then either translate the Istio CA secret into a CA cert, or just maintain the CA cert if that's what we've decided to do. So I've in below sections, I kind of I touch on like maintaining this backwards compatibility and how this translation would work in each scenario. And then, yeah, I think one additional benefit of merging both secrets into the existing CA certs is, I'm not sure of this, but I was guessing that users or customers have some mechanisms for creating or external mechanisms for creating and updating the CA cert secret. So I don't want to break any of those existing mechanisms by creating an entirely new secret that combines the two functionalities. So that's one benefit of using the existing CA cert secret. Yeah, but that's mostly it with this proposal. It's just combining those two secrets that are used when Istio D is the certificate authority. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Carsten.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I was actually looking at this as well. I just have one request, is to when we do this migration, to also change the names of the keys so it's compatible with Cert Manager, because Cert Manager can create both intermediary certificate and can provision this certificate, or it can be used as an issuer in Cert Manager. It's a relatively small change. I was going to send a PR, but if you're looking at it, it's even better. And the other comment is, I would rather keep the existing, not invent a new secret, just keep the current one. It's already, I mean, I don't know if people know, but it's already possible to pre-populate this secret and put your own certificates.
Yep.
And it's already possible to put intermediary certificates. So in reality, the CA secret can already be used instead of the other. It's just
yes.
But so basically the work will be to migrate the old one if it's detected, and decide how long we want to keep migrating it if it's created, and combining it.
Yep. Yep, agreed. Lynn?
Yeah, I was going to say, I do think if we can not use a new secret, I would be in favor of that because of existing tooling. I think there's a separate project, Istio CSR plugin or something done by the JetStack team. So ideally, we want we don't want you know, our ecosystem have to make changes because of the new proposal.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I think there are actually comments on the side where I was discussing this with someone, and we agreed that the reusing the existing one would be preferred. It's not exactly how I introduce it in this, but it is in the alternatives considered. So I can rework the doc. So I focus primarily on reusing the existing secret.
Which one?
The CA certs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's the one that's like the dynamic reload without
Yes.
looking up. It's still restart. It's still the yeah. By the way,
Yep.
thank you for starting the proposal. Looks good.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's it from me.
All right, thank you. So next is John.
Yeah, so we've been looking into cleaning up some stuff to make safe mode easier and general hygiene. So some of them are kind of obvious feature flags that we've started to clean up. Others are not feature flags, but more features that have kind of languished in odd states. So I was looking into starting the deprecation process for these, wondering if there's people that are using them. If no one says yes, it doesn't mean that they'll be instantly deleted. It just means that if someone says they are using them, then you know, need to reach out and try and find alternatives or what we should do moving forward. So just asking if anyone's using these.
So the first party JOT is the one where we use JOT token without audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, remove the option, but detect if we don't find the one audience, try to use the other one. It's
Yeah, I mean, it's to some extent a security issue to do that, right? Like is what we do today. So
yes, but we're gonna remove the option. The security option, yes. I mean, I'm the one that I kind of raised this issue the first time. It's basically if you don't trust Istio and if it, yeah. Maybe leave it for another release because remember we discussed about using Istio as an API extension or things like that, where it may be simpler to or deprecate it and see if we end up doing something with it, we'll revive it.
okay.
By the way, my concern was always Istio CA, the one with audience, has a very horrible name. I mean, the audience is Istio CA, which is used for XDS, and normally it should be the, you know, proper ways to use audience equals the Istio system. So it's maybe we should deprecate both and replace them like the previous proposal.
So John, other than asking here, should we raise this on an announcement or a general channel on Slack just to reach a broader audience?
No, we'll usually we'll go through a standard deprecation process where we add a warning and stuff. So it's just a cheap way to get a pre-signal, because if someone says, hey, actually our whole platform depends on this, then it's much easier to just ask now instead of finding that out in 3 months. So.
Makes sense.
By the way, about warning, I mean, print lines in Istio startup probably don't matter because very few read that unless they have troubles. Announcements on, you know, it's probably, again, very few people read it. Should we have some mechanism to broadcast this in a better way? I mean, have a metric.
Yeah, we already have a method that when you install any deprecated options, it gives a big warning. So
with Helm?
With Helm as well, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Now in Helm, it's probably, like if you're doing NCI, you're probably not looking at the log, so it's not great. But it does output a warning after you do Helm install and says, hey, this is deprecated.
Yeah.
So
hopefully the CI/CD tools know how to read that with machine learning or something.
Yeah. Probably not, but it's.
I was thinking, I mean, we have the metric that generates warnings where if they are rejected, which hopefully everyone is watching and monitoring and alert on it. Maybe we should have some metric with deprecated features or something that we can tell on call to monitor it, and we'll know we have the attention of SREs.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Or alpha features as well, potentially.
Yeah, everything that goes wrong should, I mean, we should make very clear in the documentation that any SRE that wants to run Istio in production should put an alert on this metric and
I think that is a useful thing, although I will say that I have no more confidence that users will look at that than they'll look at alerts or release notes or anything. I mean, we've seen very competent users that don't alert on like XDS rejections, for example, which is kind of like the most important metric probably.
Well, so
yeah, I mean, I like the more we can put things, the better. But
Okay. Oh, we got one more item. Yeah, minimum OS version.
Yeah, this is kind of similar to the last one around deprecations, but not because we're trying to clean up, but because, well, let me explain. So in Envoy, it links in a glibc version, and that version has to be compatible with the OS you run it on. In Kubernetes, we run in containers, so it doesn't matter because we just ship whatever container version we want and make sure it works. But on VMs, people run Envoy directly on the VM. And so we need compatibility with the underlying host. Now, in order to do that, we build Envoy with Ubuntu 16. That 16 stands for 2016, so that's 7 years old, and it's been end of life for a while. It's becoming a problem with we can't actually build Envoy on that older version upcoming due to compiler dependencies, etc. So we want to bump that up. The issue is that will break users that are also running on very old VMs. So kind of two questions here, I guess. One, is anyone using ancient VMs that knows about that would be impacted by this change? And the second one is a nice fix for this is to start documenting running Envoy in Docker on VMs so that they don't have this problem. And if they run on ancient versions, they can just run in Docker. Now, the people running on ancient versions and the people that run containers on VMs may not have a lot of overlap, but it's still better, I think, than just pulling the rug out from under them. To answer Costin's question, does Ubuntu support Ubuntu 16? It's end of life, but they have extended support. So I think the answer is kind of. I don't know exactly to what degree extended support is. I think on GCP, for example, they removed the image a while ago. I mean, you can still bring your own image, of course, but it's kind of in a fuzzy state of supported or not supported.
Maybe it's time to discuss again the extending the 3 months support window for Istio, or 6 months, whatever it is. I'm joking. Don't want to reopen. John, you're mute.
It's probably good I was muted. Just kidding.
Have we documented our compatibility windows for VM support?
That's a good question. I don't think we have. So we also have a CentOS 7 support, which is basically the only reason it's different than anything else is that CentOS 7 is even older than Ubuntu 16. And that, I assume, is also going to be in scope for out of support because it's super old and it's hard to maintain. Oh, actually, we don't. Oh, never mind. That's kind of an undocumented feature, so ignore that part. No, we just say Debian. We don't say anything about the compatibility. We probably should. Historically, we haven't had to because I don't think anyone really runs older than 16. So I haven't seen anyone that has run into that. But yeah, it's undocumented. We should document it.
Yeah, on the one hand, I mean, this is a beta feature, so we want to be really careful with breaking users. On the other hand, like a policy of indefinite support is not feasible for any technology. So yeah, adding
right. I mean, it's like
know.
our on Kubernetes, we only support some Kubernetes versions, right? Sorry, I think
Exactly.
I interrupted. Continue.
Yeah. And you're talking about this support would be removed in 1.19, or is this something we would do in 1.18?
I don't think we need to backport it, so it would be in 1.19.
Then maybe in 1.18 we add documentation on the support window, not including 1.16, or not including 1.16 soon, something along those lines.
Yeah, that seems like the minimum first step for sure.
Might consider even like a deprecation warning in the release notes. 1.18 says Ubuntu 1.16 is deprecated. 1.19 says Ubuntu 1.16 is not supported.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, like, I mean, the minimum thing we can do is bump to the Ubuntu 18 in our next version. But Ubuntu 18 is also end of life. So that will only buy us some amount of time. We may need to be a bit more aggressive and say, you know, they're both deprecated now. In 1.19, we only support 18, and 1.20, we only support 20. And then we have a VM, or sorry, a Docker option in case that doesn't meet people's needs.
John, does ztunnel compile on 16?
I'd imagine you can compile it, but you have to go build a old operating system to run it. So,
I mean, if you know, well, at the end of the year we have ambient released, and we can tell people using 16 just switch to ztunnel and kill two birds with one stone.
It's even worse.
Oh, it's worse. Okay, never mind. I forgot my question.
I think let me double check. I have a command open already to do it. So. Yeah, ztunnel requires actually you need Ubuntu 22 to run it. So it's yeah, it's on the oldest one. Yeah, technically it's really hard to cross compile to an older glibc version because but there is a way to do it, but I don't think we should do it.
I think it can be statically compiled, and then it doesn't depend on libc.
You can statically compile it with the muzzle, but then it's kind of questionable whether that's a good idea.
But it's much smaller. Okay, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's larger, but it's smaller if you, I don't, never mind. You know what I mean. Then do we care about distros? The only thing we care about is the glibc version because it's dynamically linked.
Yeah, and that's like, does it help any if we don't get into the weeds of like listing out distro LTS versions that we support? Should we just say, look, we want, we need this libc, whatever OS you're running, if you can get it on that, then you're probably okay. Do we need to like get into the weeds of here's the long list of distros?
I think it's probably both. Like we probably say our technical requirement is glibc, whatever. Right. But most people have no idea what that means, so we can be generally helpful and say this means Ubuntu 18 or in CentOS 8 or whatever.
But at a certain point, like if you really want to stick with an old version, you're going to have to figure out what glibc requirements you have because you're the ones deciding to stay on an old version. You're going to have to backport stuff after a certain point.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. I don't think most OSs have like multiple glibc support them. They usually stick to one.
Yeah, technically, maybe Ubuntu should start distributing Envoy, but then we have the problem that it's upstream Envoy, probably not our Envoy, and so
that won't improve anything. Yeah.
Well, it will improve if it forces us to kind of use upstream Envoy and accelerate that kind of. You can use Istio with regular Envoy without our patch if you want to.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit tricky because, like John was saying, Ubuntu 16 is still technically supported for security patches, which means people can still use it reasonably. So it's a little tricky, but I guess we don't have to support up to that point. If we want to just stop supporting it, we can, assuming there's not too many people that'll yell. And yeah, CentOS, I think, is probably been a bigger thorn in everybody's side generally anyway, because it's even older.
Yeah. Do we have anyone that's interested in testing and or documenting proxy and Docker on VMs? I think that would be a huge help for kind of mitigating this. And at least we have a defensible story other than just upgrade your VMs, which is the last thing people tend to want to do. I also think it's a generally reasonable architecture, then you do less weird stuff.
I wonder if we should not just document how to run ztunnel in the Docker image and kind of move on. But yeah, I can write a small wiki or something. I've done it a few times, and including for other environments.
Yeah, if you have something, I can try to run through it when I have some time.
Okay.
Can we put it on the official doc? Is that feasible?
Yeah. I was thinking we should probably use wiki a bit more and official docs a bit less. I mean, only for beta plus and things that are not experimental, because it's a lot of confusion right now. And I mean, almost everything in the doc has some environment variables which are used or some weird install options. And
Okay, so wiki or a doc?
we figure out. Let's have the
I
content.
think we can start with wiki, but I do think wiki is not user-facing traditionally.
Yep.
It's more for dev. So I would prefer user-facing land in our doc eventually, because wiki has like no guarantee if it works, right? Over Istio has a nice test framework where, you know, we can add test guarantee to the page. It's just so much more satisfactory to the user.
But I mean, what I meant is we should have a separation in the docs in Istio between experimental feature, and this will be experimental because probably I just tried it once and you double check is not a feature that is tested, supported, and something we are committed to. And in general, we need to split what is, you know, guaranteed, tested, and solid, and what relies on experimental features.
Yeah, that we can mark as experimental on the page.
Yeah. Okay.
Ben, do you have something?
Yeah, and Kazim just mentioned this. Like, why is it that we don't just do Docker here, right? Say like, look, Istio ships Envoy. We ship it in this Docker build context with this glibc. You want to use it on your VM, you run the Docker container. You want to do anything else, you're on your own. Like, why don't we just say that today?
Yeah, it's because some VMs images are, you know, don't have Docker installed, or they cannot run Docker, or it requires privileges, or people use containerd and not only Docker, and there is LXC, and
I guess, but it seems like that would be an easier cutoff point than maybe even the Ubuntu stuff, right? Of just like, look, here is a Docker image. If you can run that, you are good, and it has this glibc. If you can't, you're on your own. Like that covers a broad range of stuff, and also gives us like a repeatable glibc environment to like target as supported.
By the way, keep in mind the reason people use Ubuntu 16 is because their enterprise has a policy that you cannot use any other version of Ubuntu because that's the one we certify, and putting Ubuntu 25
Sure, yeah.
making it in is kind of violating the policy and bypassing the whole reason. I mean, they could just upgrade Ubuntu if they were allowed to.
Sure, yeah.
The policy probably says you can't use any other distros, but if you use distro lists, it's not a distro, so it's in the name. You're totally safe. Yeah. I think if I'm reading between the lines here, there seems some consensus that we should add Docker to the docs maybe make it the recommended, but probably not kill the old methods. Bump the minimum version, warn beforehand, and then add test for EMs. That sound like it covers everything?
Yep.
We bumped the minimum version, also documented in the official docs. I think that's what I heard earlier.
Yes, yeah. Let me try and write these all down. Action items.
I know
warn.
for the next release, right? 19. Oh, we can do this in 18?
No, in 18, we'll just give a warning so that they know ahead of time.
Okay.
Okay, did that cover everything?
I think so.
And Costa owns this, Squat owns this, someone owns this, someone owns this, and someone owns this. So if anyone's looking for things to do, all these are not terribly hard to do and would be super helpful. So feel free to tell me now or reach out in Slack or whatever, and I can help anyone get ramped up on this.
All right, and with that, any other topics for today? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, meeting adjourned. We'll see most of you in a few minutes. Thanks. Bye, folks.
Hey, John, if you're still on, oops.